Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. The Grant. My name is Niels Tudor Winter, and I'm the creator, editor, and host of The Grant. The Grant is an independent podcast initiative with the ambition to dig into all corners of the EU R&D funding system on topics of interest for the full EU R&D funding community. As regulars know, I like to dig into how organizations with few resources manage to navigate in this funding world where many things are so resource intensive. Through an old contact in Brussels, I heard of a lady in Aabenraa Municipality in southern Denmark who is a one-woman army in attracting funding for especially energy and circular economy initiatives in the municipality. Of course, I needed to have her in the virtual podcast studio. Hanne Klintøe is head of PtX Development in Aabenraa Municipality and has just managed to secure funding from the European Investment Bank. The EIB funds projects that investigate the costs and logistics of large energy projects, and since Aabenraa is looking into ambitious energy and circular economy projects, this is exactly what they need. Hanne shares about the concrete project and how she manages to navigate in the funding world in general in her work for the municipality. Please enjoy. Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. Now, today we are going to talk about local communities. We're going to talk about attracting investments and where EU funding is in that landscape. And it is a connection that I have been facilitated to by one of my old contacts from my time in Brussels. And it's I'm sure this is going to be a very, very nice conversation. But before anything else, before revealing what we're going to talk about in more detail, Hanne, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be very nice. And it's Thomas Jensen, my good old colleague from my early days back in Brussels, which seems like almost a different life now, such a long time ago. But he's such a kind person, and I've been exchanging with him recently also when I was in Brussels this autumn. And he mentioned and made the connection to you because he thought there might be something that could be of interest for my flow in my podcast and EU fund. And indeed, because today we're going to talk. You sit with attracting local investments in one of the municipalities in South Denmark, and as part of that, you also sit and involve yourself in EU funding. As a concrete EU project, we'll talk about that a little later, which was the hook for this connection. But first, and without anything else, can you shortly introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yes, my name is Hanne Klintøe. I am head of PtX Development in Aabenraa Municipality. We are the southernmost municipality in Denmark on the Jutland corridor connecting to Germany. And my role is to attract investments, as Niels said, and predominantly PtX to begin with, and then also attract investments within other sectors that can integrate with the energy system of PtX and use the surplus heat generated by this technology. So what we're really building is green growth, not the PowerPoint term that we've heard for so many years, but the actual thing where we begin to build various sectors together and utilize resources across. So succeeding with that's my job.
Yes, and it's something that is throughout most of our continent. You would have municipalities with the same role as you have, where you establish some sort of department or section, or maybe even an independent section in the municipality to attract invest, because I've been in these systems myself, so I know a little bit about how these things work, right? But it's very, you don't have a lot of money in the systems throughout the local municipalities and regions. It's not, a lot of, so you have the taxpayers' money, but if you want to realize some extra, if you want to carry out strategies that sometimes can be expensive, a lot of the money are locked in already, as like in budget posts like health or the elderly and so on and so forth. So if you want to do something extra to lift things up, then you need to go elsewhere and try to do something like that. This is what you do. This is in this corner we're talking about today.
Absolutely, and you're right. You're right in that analysis. I think in Aabenraa Municipality, we've been lucky that we've had. We're lucky to have the history that we have. We have a history over the last 200 years of just pure change. First, we lost our nationality. Then it came back in 1920. Then we had the Second World War. We were occupied. All during that time, we went from being a major maritime hub with ship owners. We lost all the ships to the two wars. Then we built industry, and we lost the industry. And now we have politicians who very ambitiously have decided to build green energy as a new sector. So it's true that it can be really hard to find money for development, but I think Aabenraa also demonstrates that if you just get started through political will and prioritization, then you can actually access the means that come in the tail end of that. And in Denmark, we have some funding that comes from implementing green energy. It comes from the developers. It goes to a national pool, and then it's paid back. And that was the money we started with, so that we had some funds to at least hire somebody like me and a few people for extra planning. And that got us started.
And just for, as the historian that I am, educated as, I'm just gonna take my listeners a little bit in the end. So Aabenraa that we're talking about here, it's in southern Denmark, and it's a part of southern Denmark that the Germans, they took through the war ending in 1864. They conquered part of two-fifths of Danish territory, and that territory was you had a plebiscite, you had a vote, I want to say. So you had after the First World War ended, they had the right to cast a vote in that region where they wanted to be, if they wanted to be under Germany or under Denmark, and that's what happened in 1920. You voted yourself back by referendum to be part of Denmark again. So that's just the historical background there. And yes, change management, because we all know that the industrial age, that where you had a lot of industries throughout, especially Western Europe, in local areas also, and then that going down, and then so it's a lot of change management. It's just history. That's change management. And especially in rural areas, like in this corner, it's away from the capital region. Now, I put here an introduction to your region. So I'm going to give you that. Try just to, and of course it is to sort of map it for people that listens out there. So what are we dealing with here? What does the municipality look like, and what is the corner you sit in Invest in Aabenraa? What are you doing? Why has it come to place? Before we move into to talking about the funding part.
So we're quite an atypical municipality. We are a rural municipality with 63% of our business sector is agriculture, but we also are home to large-scale infrastructure, really strong transport infrastructure. So we have a deep sea port. Used to be the home to a coal plant, and we have the industrial port has two different divisions, south and north. So quite a lot of capacity in the port compared to us being this municipality with only 59,000 inhabitants. At the same time, we have the TEN-T route, Scandinavian Mediterranean route, going through. We have one of the Nordics' largest logistics centers. We have the gas pipe, we have the NEPS pipe, we have pretty much all infrastructure you could wish for. Then we have a transformer station that's being built out from 12 hectares to 135 hectares, meaning it will be Denmark's largest transformer station.
Mm.
So with all this infrastructure, we have really, really good cards to build the green transition. And we've started with renewable energy, wind and solar, where we're leading in Denmark on solar capacity. So that's the sort of backdrop. Then what our politicians very wisely have pointed out is that whenever we implement something new, we must have a great focus on the follow-on effects for our citizens. What is it brings them? What does it bring them that we implement solar? What does it bring them that we have the world's largest PtX plant built by European Energy? What does it mean for the municipality as a whole that e-methanol, green e-methanol is being produced in Aabenraa Municipality? And what are the follow-on effects outside the energy system? So we had an analysis done where we could see that not only do we get jobs in the building phase of the solar plants or the PtX plants, we also get permanent jobs, particularly in PtX. But the real sort of ace in the mix is that electrolysis isn't a completely effective technology, and that means that you waste some of the energy. When you put the green electricity in, you get about, I think it's 30% comes out as surplus heat. And this surplus heat is of a high quality. We've heard before about sector integration with data centers because they produce heat and they really need to keep it cool. But that heat is only about 30 degrees. And that means you need heat pumps. It's an extra cost. Then you can pump it up and you can use it as the 70-degree district heating that we need in Denmark. But PtX is very close to that. It comes out at like 60, 65 degrees, meaning it's really close to what we actually need in the system. So that's a big opportunity to provide green district heating for the whole municipality. But we can also see that it's so much heat that we will actually run out of houses very, very quickly, given that we're such a small municipality in terms of numbers. So what we're looking at is actually to generate green business growth from this source of surplus heat and other side streams, and then bind it all together so that we use the heat as process heat in, say, food production. It can be in materials production, particularly bio-based materials we're interested in because we have a lot of lowlands where you can grow grass. And that means that you have the biomass needed for sustainable building materials. Needless to say, we have a very large building sector, not least from this development. So all of that ties in together, and all of a sudden we have these value chains that go across different sectors through the build out of shared infrastructure. We can share the heat. We can use water from wastewater and clean it to ultra clean water for PtX. So we have all these different resource streams that we have now mapped out, and we can see they fit together. So really we just need to deploy. But as you can imagine, that costs quite a bit of money.
Yeah, and that's where you come into the picture with the Invest in Aabenraa, right? Because it's these initiatives, because it all falls into the circular economy. Like if you zoom out, so this is a wonderful example of a local community that's tapping into what can we do because a lot of things are happening, and so it's not just in your municipality. It's most of southern Denmark and also central Denmark. You have this move toward PtX and try to take advantage of all the sustainability measures taken over the last 20-30 years in Denmark with wind energy, renewable energy. Infrastructure is already there now. So tell me, Invest in Aabenraa.
Yes, my role is it's not a role that has existed in any municipality before, but the city council were very focused on making sure that now that Aabenraa has this big PtX plant, then we really need to make sure that we reap all the benefits. So they decided to hire more of a commercial profile, not somebody that they've had before in the administration, that could, number one, attract the investors, but number two, be the sort of strategist to lead what needs to happen. What is it we need to do both politically in the administration, building infrastructure out, what kind of conditions can we build for the investors so that they come, and also so that they utilize all these resources the way that we want them to. Mm-hmm. So when I came into the job, there wasn't a platform, there wasn't any communication materials or anything like that. So the first thing I did was to try and sketch out what is our brand, what is it we attract on. And then we built Invest in Aabenraa. So really it's a one woman show. I have an assistant, and then we just drive the communication. But I also go on road trips and go out and literally meet the investors, physically. So I go to various conferences, I go and speak on conferences. So it's really a marketing function to make sure that we have channels that feed into our ecosystem. And apart from that, what you can't see on Invest in Aabenraa on the website, if you go in there, is that I've built a huge stakeholder network of contacts who can refer into me, organizations that both have more muscle power, but also that represent businesses that could be relevant for us. So I've been in Brussels, meeting some trade organizations there. I've been to London. I've been to various different places. I've spoken to chambers of commerce to make sure that they know we're here and what we're building. And so when a relevant company comes up, then they can connect us. And that has worked really well.
Yeah, it's it's an octopus. It's octopus role you have there, because it's also, and we'll get back to that when we move into the funding conversation, because obviously, and I also mentioned a little earlier, resources, that's always an issue in municipalities, and that's a universal thing. It's the same here in Spain where I am, for instance, or in France or in Hungary, whatever, as it is in Denmark. Resources, so it's for these kind of things, it's often a one-man band, and it requires, we're also going to talk about network later, but that indeed what you're doing there, it's both reaching out, both international network, but I also know that you have tapped a lot into the local network in South Denmark, where there is a lot, there are some structures set, right, with people collaborating on this.
Yes, absolutely. I think the thing we have to be very careful about in the municipalities when we launch these efforts is that we don't cannibalize each other, but rather use each other and the knowledge that's there, the experience, etc. Some municipalities have looked to attract businesses that might need a second division or a second plant or something from Denmark. And there's nothing wrong with that if they indeed want a second plant in Denmark. But even better if we can get out into the world and attract foreign companies to Denmark. So we add to the ecosystem. So there are some things we can collaborate on locally, and there are also some things where where I think the best thing to do is to get out into the world and connect with different companies that can add to our ecosystems here in Denmark.
Or cannibalizing the competition of funding and so on.
Yeah, well, the funding, it's a good idea to work together. We've just heard that we're probably landing a project on pyrolysis where there's another municipality involved, and we've had projects before with various municipalities. The report we did on the societal value of renewable energy and Power-to-X. We initiated it, but we did it with 7 other municipalities. And while it's a big job to orchestrate, then the data that we got into the report was considerable and meant that we could actually conclude on the societal value. If we had just done it ourselves, that wouldn't have been a great data set. It could be just, well, you were lucky. But now that we're 8 municipalities together, that's a strong data set. We can see the value and what has become of this development.
It's a perfect bridge into our next section to talk about funding and the motivation. So now you opened that up already. So now you talked about a specific project that looks promising on receiving the grant, but I put him with the motivation to a process. The motivation should be obvious, but can you share a little bit about how you have integrated? So you have a strategy, naturally, you have the municipality, and there's a strategy for attracting investment and so on. So how does EU funding, if you want to talk about funding in general, also Danish, but if we need a new angle here also to make sure it's covered, can you share how you're working with that?
Absolutely. I tend to work best if I know quite specifically what I'm looking for funding for. It can be a huge task to keep an eye on various calls and what we might be able to use them for. So I tend to work from the strategic angle and being quite sure of the paths I need to develop and the timeline I need to develop them on. So the first thing I tried to look into was obviously for the Power-to-X. We had a lot of projects in pipeline, we still do, and I was very well connected in the Power-to-X landscape, particularly in the Danish-German landscape. And many were talking about hydrogen valleys. 2 large-scale applications have been sent in, and unfortunately, neither of them went through.
Oh no, it's difficult, no?
It's a difficult one, and the competition is really, really tough. And there are a lot of great applications being sent in. So I mean, it is what it is. But I took it upon myself. The wish to create a hydrogen valley was very strong, and there was some big business owners who sort of came to me and like, looks like you're a dynamic person to consult. Like, can we make this happen? And so I took it upon myself to figure out like, why didn't we succeed? And it's very clear that the ones that have succeeded, they have some form of connection in their ecosystem already. So there's a big one in Auvergne-Alpes, Rhône-Auvergne-Alpes. I think the land area covers something like 8 million people and more. So it's quite large. And what they said when I spoke to them was that they were already an existing ecosystem just based on gas. And everyone was in agreement that we need to switch to something else over time. So let's just start doing this. So all of these different businesses, I think it's a consortium of 45 or something. They were in agreement. They already had business cases together. So they were trading together and also together abroad towards other clients. And that ecosystem cohesion, I think, is absolutely central to landing a huge grant like a Hydrogen Valley.
Yeah.
So therefore, we looked at different routes. I spoke with the EU office of Southern Denmark, and they said, well, actually, we've just spoken to the European Investment Bank, and the European Investment Bank is aligned with the Paris Agreement, so they support the green transition, and they have advisory services to give to municipalities and regions under the Just Transition Fund, and we are under that. So I spoke to them, and they said, what do you need? And I said, well, I need to mature this ecosystem in southern Denmark and northern Germany and really get it to work together and map out all the different actors and create a roadmap for how do we move on. And then I need to set up an organization that can drive it. And they're like, yeah, we can do that. So I've now worked with them for rather a few more months than I hoped for, but it's turned into a really, really good project that is launching now. And that is a great way of finding alternative funding for an organization with very limited resources, because basically the work is being carried out by other hands. So it's not one of these projects where then we need to spit in 35% that we don't have, or where we only get enough funding for a quarter of an employee. So it has to be an existing, it's something we get on top. And yeah, I will have to sprint a little bit faster in some periods when we have the reporting, but it's definitely worth it. And it's going to create so much value.
I'm Thomas Brent, and you should definitely listen to The Grant because it is the best podcast on European funding. Listen to it, give it a 5-star rating, go!
Amen. Let's just move into talking about the project, because after that, when we talked about the specific project you won, then we will have a more in-depth conversation about how you actually work. So all the questions that I was just having on the tip of my tongue, that sometimes I forget my own rundown, to keep myself here following a structure so the listeners follow quite nicely out there. So let's just first talk about so the project you won from the EIB. So you already mentioned it. Share a little bit, and then afterwards, with departing from that, we sort of get a little bit more meat on the bone on how you actually manage with few resources to get these things rolling out. So the project.
So I think I described it, sort of the outline of it. It really is to bridge the gap between non-cohesive ecosystem within hydrogen and all the value chains, an ecosystem where the infrastructure is missing, where we only have a few projects and plants, the use cases are not really there yet, and bridging the gap from that situation to a stage where you begin to see it connect. So connect in infrastructure and connect in value chains. And only at that second stage do I think we will be ready to win a huge Hydrogen Valley grant or something else. So
let's just a second. Just need to take a listeners a little bit in the hand here. So the area we're talking about, it's power to X, and that means energy to hydrogen.
Yeah, let's take that one first. So basically, to create green hydrogen, you need renewable energy it could be from wind power, hydro, solar, whatever. In Denmark, we have wind and solar, and then you, through electrolysis,
which is basically adding electricity to water.
Yeah. So with the electrons, you split water, H2O, into H2, which is hydrogen, and then O, which then connects and becomes O2, oxygen. The oxygen goes into the air. But the hydrogen, you can then use either as a gas or you can refine it into a green fuel. In Aabenraa, it's refined by adding CO2, so biogenic CO2 that we harvest from biogas plants. And then that's mixed and you get e-methanol. And e-methanol is a brilliant fuel for instance, shipping.
Indeed.
And you can also take the e-methanol and refine it further. And then you get e-SAF, and that is the green aviation fuel.
So the project that you won, so what is the actual action? So what are you going to do there? What do they give you money for, so to say, to carry out?
Just to recap what the aim is. The aim is not necessarily to be able to apply for Hydrogen Valley under the Clean Hydrogen Fund. The aim is to get southern Denmark and northern Germany to connect as one big hydrogen valley, whether it's under a call or whether it's not. It's a hydrogen cluster, you could say, a cross-border cluster of hydrogen value chains.
So that's your strategic goal.
Yeah. So when we say hydrogen, it's also Power-to-X. When we say Power-to-X, it's also hydrogen. So call it what you want.
Yeah.
That's the big goal. And in the project, it's not really organized in work packages or anything like that, but we have two phases. So phase one is to map out all the various hydrogen projects and actors, both suppliers and producers and off-takers and the whole shebang, as well as any infrastructure that helps the hydrogen ecosystem, and that is already been built or is being built. When we've mapped all that out, we can identify a bit of a strategic way forward. We can see what is missing, what do we need to do. So we create a bit of an action plan. That's also in the project. Meanwhile, there are some bits of infrastructure that we already know will be missing even when we get the hydrogen backbone. The hydrogen backbone is the big catalyst for the hydrogen industry. It's being built all over Europe, and we are going to get it from the west coast of Denmark in Esbjerg, all the way down to Aabenraa and the border, where it will connect with the German hydrogen backbone. And that's the real catalyst. Once you can put the hydrogen into a grid and somebody else far away can offtake it, then you actually have the basis for an industry. But in order for the industry to work together and become a cluster, to become an ecosystem and a hub for the world where green hydrogen is produced, you need much more. So you need CO2 infrastructure. So the project is looking at that from Hamburg and Kiel to Esbjerg. Can we connect all of these localities where we're producing Power-to-X so that we can take the local biogenic CO2 wherever it is and then lead it to where the refineries are. We're also looking at the missing bit of the hydrogen backbone. In Denmark, it was decided to first do a lower 7. That means that it goes from Esbjerg into the mid-country and then it goes south. And
so we're talking piping here for the listeners
pipeline
out there. So pipes.
And to the east of that, so if the 7 were to become a T, if you draw it, to the east of that, there already is a 20 megawatt hydrogen plant that works with Crossbridge Refinery.
Yep.
And unfortunately, that was down prioritized in this first phase. So we're going to do a feasibility study on that and see how we can make it happen. And there are 2 more bits of infrastructure that we're going to look at. Number one is in Aabenraa Municipality, seeing as we are as land area very large, with 940 square kilometers, and we want this circularity of resources. We want green district heating from the surplus heat to all of the municipality, then we need to build infrastructure. So we need to build out the district heating network, but we also need to collect wastewater from all over the municipality, so that we can create enough technical water to create the hydrogen.
And technical water out there, that's that's the term for sludge water or sugar water or the water you wouldn't put. It's not
Yes.
drinking water, yeah. So
No.
it's a big thing in the technology development in hydrogen now, that how you can take advantage of the dirty water. So water that's not expensive to take and use that in the process.
Yes. So in Aabenraa Municipality, there's been a political decision to invest in a technical water plant, where we create technical water from wastewater, from surface water, and from seawater. And we have different streams, we have different off-takers of the technical water, where PtX is the one where you actually clean the water the hardest, for the electrolysis to happen and for the electrolyzer to not break by corrosion or something else. Any salt in the water needs to be removed. Any impurity needs to be removed. And that means you end up with a rather large amount of ultra dirty sludge. And this ultra dirty sludge we plan to create pyrolysis on, because pyrolysis can destruct both PFAS, leftovers of medicine. It can't destruct heavy metals, but it can how do you say that? Basically, the heavy metals won't be bioavailable in the biochar that results, as much as it is out in the environment. So it's not a perfect solution. So it's not the kind of biochar that you put out into the fields as fertilizer, that we will do from digestate. But this, just to get back to because we were on the funding and these feasibility studies, the feasibility study for that is on creating the wastewater infrastructure all around the municipality, so that we can knock together. We have 7 different older treatment plants today, and then we can create like a state-of-the-art treatment plant centrally, and also a technical water plant, so that we have these resources, which is basically completely essential to any of the business development that we want to do. We won't have more PtX, we won't have any food producers, we won't have any materials producers if we don't have water and if we don't have the heat. So that is like fundamental. So that's another one that we have in the project.
So cutting into the bone. So this is, and also this, many municipalities and local authorities out there, you know the same problem here if you're listening. It's a matter of a loan to project, a loan to do the sketching of what you want to do with these expensive things. That alone is expensive. This is what the EIB, they step in and fund. They also have other funding schemes for these kind of. So paying consultancies, paying engineering companies, paying involving whatever authorities that you will need, also in terms of what would this entail, what would it in all practicalities, if we would need to carry out this investment or this infrastructure development, what would it entail and what would it cost? So this alone is something that's expensive, especially when it's a new energy area like this. So it's important for local communities like yours to be able to have those costs covered. So you have an idea, because you can do all kinds of things with circular economy, with sustainable energy, whatever. But if you don't have the money to understand in the first place before you make it's good or bad decisions, right? If you make a bad decision, it can be very expensive for a local community. If you take bad decisions that are wrong, that creates damages, whatever so this, it's so that's the core of the project. Basically, you want to be part of doing something good, circular economy, sustainable energy in your community, and then you take the financial sting off by
we
getting
do
some
the
funding.
analysis. I think that's the beauty of this project, is that we get all the analysis done so that we know what's what. But there's another silver lining to the project, and that is the EIB is basically a bank. The EIB was funded or was created to be the bank for Europe. So they finance things. And this is where the very important difference between funding and financing comes in. They do finance. And when they look at pre-feasibility studies like the ones in our project, they are looking at them because they're looking for a business case for large scale, long-term loan that they can provide. So if their pre-feasibility study of our sector coupling infrastructure in Aabenraa Municipality, if that study shows that, yes, this is a good case and it will be paid off in X amount of years, then they will offer the financing. And the really lovely thing about that is that for as long as the Just Transition Fund exists, there are PSLF grants to be had when the EIB goes in and finances a huge piece of infrastructure. And that means that you can basically get a 15% grant, same as 15% discount on a really, really huge infrastructure project. So it's about 200 to 300 million euros, I think, something like that. So 15% of that, that's a kind of money, that's nice money. Yeah. So that's another sort of really good part of the project, is that it could actually lead to a grant, a very, very good financing terms, and then a grant on top.
Now let's move into talk a little bit about how you managed to handle and juggle with these things, because one thing is that you have this EIB grant, which is feasibility study grant, but also the Horizon projects that you mentioned that you've been involved in, and I think, and this the discourse of this project, this podcast, it is my one of my sort of discourses to share how people in a tight spot, they manage to juggle with these things anyways. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what kind of funding you are working with, strategy. If you want to share that a little bit, also how you engage yourself in when proposals are going on, and what you can do and what you cannot do, and so on, and how you yourself, for your own time management, dealing with these things. So can you open up a little bit about this?
Yes. I'm glad that we're speaking now and not last year when I was only 6 months into the job, because then the answer would have been run faster. But obviously you can't do that in the long run. So I tend to be very selective. I say no to a lot. There are many who want to work with us because we've created the visibility that we have, and we have some really good projects and opportunities in the municipality. And that is wonderful. And I always try to see if we can't be part of the project you're doing, how can we work together in other ways or create mutual value? I just had an email from a Dutch hydrogen valley. They applied last year, and they're on a waiting list, but they don't think it will come through because the competition is so high. And they wanted to include us as a replica area. So basically we're part of the application, and we can then participate, and then we can use whatever's found in this project. We can use that and replicate it in our geography. And they just wrote today to say that they don't want us to pay for a second application. they just want us to join. So that's really, really nice. So these are some of the things that come out of just being, really well connected and actually working strategically with networking. So that's one thing. I think the network, I explained it earlier that I have a lot of organizations that I coordinate with and that I come to their conferences and I often speak at their events and things like that. And that means that they have us in mind if there's a relevant company or something else that we can be part of. So that's another thing. But how do we work with funding? So pyrolysis is something we've been fundraising for, and we hope that this application will go through. It's under the Just Transition Fund as well. And here we work with our neighboring municipality, Tønder, as well as universities and research institutions and a couple of different businesses.
So you go into collaboration with other municipalities? Are there other ways? How do you, for instance, when you engage in a proposal, if we take the EIB apart, if we take some of the Horizon Europe, Hydrogen Valley, you said you were involved in that. So
the path of least resistance.
So it's important for others out there to be inspired about how you juggle these things, because it's resource intensive work if you step into any, right?
It is.
So you don't. So obviously, my best guess is you don't.
Well, the way I can only speak for myself in the municipality, but I'm the one driving this development. So that's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
We don't have in the municipality a fixed resource that sits with project applications.
No, that's true.
We just don't have that. So I am that for this area, and I go into the projects when I deem that is a good idea to do, well knowing that there will be some work the other end that then needs to be allocated. And we're now finding our feet in that. We have a green project manager in the administration for planning, environment, and technical. And he can take some, but he also has his day job. So I think this also kind of leads to your question at the end, like, what's the toughest challenge? Which is, the toughest challenge is to build the project organization through a larger grant that was a heavy workload to produce, but you get the big reward. So you can hire somebody who sits with that project and can then keep an eye on other projects and maybe help create the next application. Yeah. But it's that first stage till you get the first 1 or 2 employees who basically tackle all this work. Yeah. That is really, really hard. So right now, my strategy for that is to work with organizations who have that capacity. And we're very lucky in Denmark that we have some extremely good clusters. An energy cluster, Denmark has just launched a new model by which they can both help in the application. They already did, but they also have a model for how they can then run the administration of the project throughout the duration. And I think that is going to help a lot with the resource problem. Another approach is to work with institutions, knowledge institutions, research institutions, such as the Danish Technological Institute, because they also have some capacity to do these project applications, and they have the experience to basically land a really, really good application. And we've also involved them in the pyrolysis project, and they're basically the project manager. And lastly, it is to work with the universities, because they have all the knowledge. They write really sharp applications, but they don't have the capacity to be, for instance, project manager. So once you come to that and you need to allocate a resource for that, then you have universities with few resources and municipalities with few resources. So you really need a party there that can pick up that baton.
The good thing about Denmark is, if you work with Danish universities, you actually they're quite advanced, the Danish universities, when it comes to project support offices. University of South Denmark, which is also in your corner, they have a section, and then you have the RTO, Technological Institute of Denmark. You have DTU, Technical University of Denmark. That's also in your corner. That they have a lot. They experience the new funding. They don't fumble about, but yes, it's always an issue with coordination.
There's still some hard restrictions on what they're allowed to do in the projects and how they might be funded. So often with the universities, all the other project partners needs to spit into a pool and then cover their salary if they're participating, and that for a municipality is virtually impossible. Like we can't. So that's also something to consider. But I think to sort of boil it down, look for very specific things that you need to build in order to get to the next stage. Try to create a project for that. And in the beginning, I mean, really, there is no other way than just squeezing your buttocks and trying harder and putting the hours in. It's a lot of extra hours, but if you want it to succeed, that's basically what you have to do.
Did you make yourself sort of a list of the key funding schemes that you focus on, so you don't?
Nope. I ask others that are wiser than me and that have that as their job. So I work with the clusters, the food and bio cluster, energy cluster Denmark. I'm contacted by a lot of people because I've created the awareness of what we're doing. So people come to us and ask, do you want to be in this? Do you want to join that? And then I speak to other paths. I speak to IFO, the Export and Innovation Fund. I speak to, other parties that can provide some kind of either funding or financing or project route. And then I get them to check all the details. And very often in project applications, I will provide strategic input, but I won't be the one writing the bulk of it because I don't have the time for that.
Before we we end this corner of the conversation, how much intelligence on the networking do you do? So do you use the multipliers like the energy cluster, like the South Denmark EU office to guide you to the next places for conversations, so to say, or do you invest yourself some intelligence in who to talk to, or how do you do this?
Well, I think I came into this job already fairly well connected, having worked very intensely with String, an international organization, and also doing quite a few events in Brussels. So I had the beginnings of a network. I sat in the working group that designed the funding recommendations, at least the financing recommendations for the hydrogen backbone, where most of the industry was represented. So that was a good background for starting in my job. I don't use the clusters so much for networking because clusters are in nature focused on a lower TRL than what I am looking for. So technology readiness level. So they drive early innovation. They also help businesses scale, but if you look at the bulk of their projects, it will often be on early innovation. So the ones I network with are trade offices. It's at conferences where the industries I want to talk to are present. I went to a great one in Brussels, Next Bite, with lots of different innovative food producers. So I basically watch for that. I scan the horizon for events where I can meet a lot in one go, and then I'm very effective in following up and making sure to engage.
Yeah, because this is actually a very important point here towards the end, that you have to realize where in the timeline you're tapping in. So for you, it's deployment. You need things to happen on the ground. You don't need to sit in a heavy soap research project, because it's not going to give you an
I need scale ups. I basically need
exactly.
scale. If you want to create a big development in a municipality, then catering to startups is very, very difficult. It demands a lot of resources. They need a lot of resources. You need the business infrastructure. You need offices. You need a test space for them. You need a lot to be built before they arrive. And then you need, a good 20, 40 of them for that to make sense. So that's a much later stage. Really now we need to look at standalone businesses within these different tracks that we now know. And we are launching a project, with a company called Smith Innovation, where they will look at all the different, resource streams for bio-based materials and then engage, various companies that are already looking into that, and then we will select the ones that can produce on surface heat. But that's not a funded project. That's just a straight up consultancy package. But that's something that could lead to a project later, because then once all these businesses want to establish that, we could do, then there's a little circle there where you could do a grant application to establish the hub for them.
And we are moving towards the end here. So let's move into the reflections and advice. I think we covered quite well how you work. Thank you so much for sharing this. Now, reflections. Just hear, think, people like you sitting out there. Reflections about all this work with funding and maybe an advice or two to your peers.
Yeah, I think if you have limited resources, I think I basically stole your final bit here, because I already talked about the toughest challenge.
We'll get to that in a second, and then you can repeat it.
Okay. But it all comes down to the same thing. Like when you sit in a position like mine, where you have a lot of different things that you need to start up and develop and drive and succeed with, the key question is always, where are the resources? Have you got enough hours in the day? And it really pays off to have a very good strategic perspective that you have researched. It pays off to invest in the data you need that proves your strategy. And it pays off to both run, but also take the time for focus time, because there's a lot of development in this, and you can run yourself mad by just going to all the conferences and getting all the contacts, but you actually need a lot of focus time to mature those contacts, to figure out what your funding needs are, and to then land those. And so for funding, I would say, when in doubt, ask somebody who knows. So instead of doing all your own research and trying to become an expert in funding schemes, ask those who know. Ask your EU office. Ask the clusters. The clusters basically live off this. So they are super well informed on very specific calls for very specific things. So use them. We have become a member of both Energy Cluster Denmark and Food and Bio Cluster, and I think that's money well spent, because there is just a wealth of knowledge there. And for me to sit and keep an eye on the calls and understand them and translate it into what we need, it would just be way too much time. So yeah, so always ask. I think be visible and ask a lot.
I think it's actually square root from many of the other episodes I've been running with this focus we also have here, that check your resources, find out where do you actually have resources, also the national contact points and so on, people that are there where you don't have to pay necessarily for their advice or guidance. Just do what you can to get someone to guide you, because it's a parallel world of a rabbit hole that
Yeah, and then I'd say final advice, just start. Because very often when we don't really know how to go about something, or if we have so many different things to develop, we'll go, okay, I don't know how to do that one, I don't know how to do that one, I don't know how to do that one, so I'll just do this one over here. But then you don't succeed. There might be 10 different tracks that you need to succeed with. So whatever you don't know, just start somewhere, because the minute you start, you will start asking questions. You'll go, okay, well then I have to figure this out. Who knows that? And then you think about that. Who could give me the answer to that? You ask that person, or you find that organization, then you're already going. So always look at who's gone before, find those people, and most people are willing to help. Like, don't sit in your box and just think you have to figure it all out, because you don't.
It's a nice note to end on, but it's not the end, because we've been talking about the toughest challenge a couple of times. Hit me. What is it? Toughest challenge, Hanne?
Yeah. Well, the resources are the toughest challenge. I think for municipalities, it's also knowing what's right. You touched upon it in the beginning of the podcast as well, that it is so important when you're dealing with other people's money, which we are in municipalities, that you make the right choices. So I think there's a lot to be said for data, having really good data, creating the reports and the analysis that you need to basically tell you that's the right way to go. Because we can have many assumptions. We can also have a lot of courage, but when we deal with other people's money, we shouldn't assume, we should know. So, so do your research.
I concur. The Grand Editorial Office concur.
That's good.
And I'm just going to land the plane before we say goodbye to the listeners. So, dear listener, thank you so much for listening to the end. I really hope you enjoyed this. As regulars know, I love to dig into these kind of things and geek around how to handle funding in small organizations with few resources. Hope you enjoyed it. This peek into how they work in Aabenraa. If you like what I do, if you like this conversation, go to my website, thegrant.eu. You'll find more than 200 podcast episodes, and it's not all about municipalities and how they work, but there's of course tons of information there and content about how to prepare proposals, how to implement projects, about the ecosystems, about Brussels, how that works, lobby, and so on. So check it out, and when you go and you look at it and say, wow, fantastic resource has been made here, how can I support this guy? You go to the bottom of each page and you'll have an online form. You register for my email list. This is how you can support me best as an independent podcaster. Finally, of course, connect with me on LinkedIn. On there I have myself, of course, Niels Tudor Winther. Connect with me there, but also go and like the Grand page. That's where the fun happens. That's where the flow is. That's also where I pick up a lot of my guests. So if you have something you want to share with the community, reach out, and most likely you'll be on the show. And addendum to this, I just established an Instagram. I want to create a community, Hanne. I want to be closer to my listeners. I want to, and it's difficult on LinkedIn. People don't connect on LinkedIn. They don't. There's no warmth, so to say.
No.
Everybody is cool, calm, and collected because it's career. So I want to create a space where it's a little bit more relaxed and lower shoulder. So I created an Instagram account. I'm exchanging also with some of my contacts. I might flow that also into Facebook, just making it a little bit more relaxed. I live in Costa del Sol. I have wonderful photos I share with people and so on, just to share how I work as a podcaster. They're like the getting a view peek into what I do here. So do you have an Instagram account then?
I do.
Do you use it? Are you active?
I am active. I use it mainly privately, but if I'm at a big event, I post something about that as well. As a previously self-employed for 1,000 years person, my life and my private life and my professional life tend to meld into one. So
that's what it does, right?
It does on my Instagram as well.
I have created the Grand Podcast Instagram account, but I also have my own personal account. But I haven't been on Instagram, It's but now I am starting to sort of. I try to find a tone of voice, right? It's like this. You have to create a discourse. You have to create. So I'm trying, Hanne, to build my podcast. No. Thanks for joining. It's been extremely cozy. Thank you so much for sharing everything about the project, about how you work and so on. Now let's say goodbye to dear listeners. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Grant. All the Grant episodes have their own site on the Grant website. You will find the link to the episode site where you listen to your podcast. On the site for this episode, you'll find a link to Hanne's personal LinkedIn site, and you'll also find a link to the website of the municipality. Next week, I zoom in on the hydrogen area. The Hydrogen Valleys are the flagship projects of the Clean Hydrogen Partnerships work program under Horizon Europe. I have one of the valleys in the studio for a talk about managing large projects. You can indeed look forward to that.